GS1 is an important partner for UNCFACT and has been actually a key contributor to our project at UNEC, a project that aims at enhancing traceability and transparency of value chains in the garment and footwear industry that has been launched back in 2019. And the aim of my presentation today is to share with you progress, highlights, findings, and solutions that actually we have developed in the context of this project. So as I mentioned, the focus of the project is the garment and footwear industry. Why this industry? Because it's one of the major industry, a turnover of 3 trillion US dollars annually. It's an industry that has global, complex, fragmented value chains, which of course poses challenges like we have been seeing in the context of the COVID pandemic. Most of the industry is SMEs and is an industry that at the same time poses high risks and challenges in terms of environmental, health and safety, social and human rights impacts that are well documented. That's why the link to many of the SDGs of the 2030 agenda, ranging from gender, from inclusive growth, responsible consumption and production, combat of climate change, sustainable use of natural resources. So many areas relevant to the achievement of the SDGs in the 2030 agenda. At the heart, let's say, of the project we have launched at UNEC in 2019 is the traceability and transparency of value chains that are increasingly seen as an enabler for sustainability, circularity, and due diligence in this industry. If we can move to the presentation, perhaps we can look at some of the issues. The next one, please. I wanted to discuss today in terms of key messages to share through the presentation, together with two other project team members, Gerard and Andrea, who are going to contribute to the discussion this morning. I would like to start from the following. Basically, let's say, high focus and important and key role for policy coherence and wide industry engagement to achieve change at scale. An increasing role for policymakers and regulators in international trading systems, standardized business and data model as a key enabler for interoperable international standards, and the instrumental role of technology. These are the, let's say in a nutshell, the elements we are going to discuss through the presentation. So starting from key drivers, to the next slide, please, for traceability and transparency, as Ken has underlined. First is consumers' increasing demand for sustainable products and for sustainability claims that are reliable. I mean, a lot of research, even during the COVID pandemic, has highlighted that more than 70–80% of consumers are ready to go for more sustainable, responsible consumption choices in the garment and footwear industry, and are ready to pay more. At the same time, they do not fully trust the sustainability claims made about the clothing, the products they buy, claims about the who, where, and how their clothing is made, which poses a challenge. The second driver for more traceability and transparency, the second, let's say, type of demand for more traceability and transparency comes from civil society, media, and investors that are also increasingly asking for more accountability when it comes to sustainability claims. And the third, it's the business, it's the industry itself, actually, that looking at traceability and transparency of value chains as important, let's say, aspects to better manage reputational risk, but also to manage more efficiently resources along the value chain, in production and transformation processes in the value chain. They are looking at transparency and traceability as drivers for more effective collaboration and cooperation along the value chain. As in fragmented global value chain, it's and this is something that we are facing as part of the project ourselves. There is very little visibility of who the actors, the suppliers, the clients are, where are they based, where they are located. So collaborative business models are very tough and challenging, actually, to put in place. Therefore, it's the business itself that is increasingly demanding for more visibility around value chains and what's happening in the value chain. Next, please. So as a consequence, there has been actually an acceleration in the policy and regulatory framework in support of sustainability, circularity, and highlighting traceability and transparency as key enablers for sustainability and circularity at the EU level, at the global, of course, at the EU and the national level. At the EU level, for instance, the Circular Economy Action Plan has been identifying garment and footwear as a priority sector for the circular transition, with traceability and transparency as a very high, let's say, on the agenda there, and important enablers. The EU is also currently working on mandatory due diligence and a project of a new EU directive for due diligence that also targets the garment and footwear industry as a priority sector. Right now, the European Commission is undertaking a consultation on an EU textile strategy and working to a European product passport, which actually defines environmental, human rights, and social criteria for target products, including textile and leather. The EU level, it's interesting because actually works on this aspect of the policy coherence have been highlighting, because at the same time, many member states in the EU, France, the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, have been actually working and pushing their garment and footwear industry towards more, let's say, sustainable, circular performance and stronger due diligence. But outside the EU, it has been mentioned by Ken, Australia with the Modern Slavery Act, the UK, the USA, India are also, let's say, demanding the industry stronger compliance with human rights criteria when it comes to forced labor, but also child labor and other type of fundamental human rights and labor standards. So certainly there is this, let's say, acceleration at the global, regional, national level for stronger, let's say, for compulsory and mandatory requirements when it comes to compliance with environmental, social, human rights standards. Next, please. So what is the response at UNEC? Having seen that, let's say, traceability, transparency are put really at the heart of these efforts, we have been working on a toolbox, and this has been done through a multi-stakeholder approach involving all key industry actors globally. We have, as part of the project, more than 250 experts that have been actively contributing, representing all key industry actors, governments, NGOs, academia, business associations, private companies, big brands, and retailers, and with business associations representing more than 190,000 companies globally from over 30 countries. So really a true global effort. There we have been working at different levels, because what we believe and what is clear is that, you know, as mentioned also by Maria, traceability, transparency are complex efforts, and they need actually need an holistic approach that takes into account the policy regulatory dimension, the business and data model dimension, and the technology dimension. Certainly, and I would like to emphasize that there are an increasing number of technology solutions out there, blockchain, IoT, Internet of Things, that can play an important role and are, let's say, part of the solution. At the same time, what we believe and what we have found out also from the work with our network of our experts is that they are not sufficient. Behind that, and as an important foundation and basis, you do need to have the policy regulatory model right. You do need to have this policy coherence in place to avoid fragmentation, to avoid unnecessary burden and barriers, and especially for the SMEs. And you do need to have a standardized business and data model to allow all industry actors actually to speak the same language when it comes to the data, the information that needs to be collected and exchanged along the value chain. We have been working on all these three dimensions. Regarding the policy model, with UNCFACT, we have developed, and now this is adopted by our member states, a policy recommendation with guidelines and action plan. And we have launched a call to action for the industry. In the policy recommendation and the guidelines, we discuss the why and how traceability and transparency can help sustainability, circularity, and due diligence in the industry. And we also discuss what key measures governments need to put in place in order to help the industry move in that direction. In the guidelines, we discuss the key principles and we discuss the key elements of a traceability and transparency approach. While in the action plan, we basically provide, let's say, a model plan for companies that want to advance in this, and we discuss how traceability and transparency need to be streamlined and incorporated in a wider sustainability strategy for a company. The business and data model, it's something that Gerard is going to present and discuss in more detail. There we have developed, we have conducted business process analysis, we have developed business requirement specifications, and basically we have done a standardized mapping of the value chain stages for all type of fibers and materials. We have identified the key actors that need to do traceability and transparency along the value chain, the key data and documents they need to exchange, collect and exchange for that purpose based on standardized definition. And then the technology model, because as I said, technology is an important enabler that needs to be duly considered, and there are certainly very interesting technology developments like blockchain that seem to be very promising when it comes to supporting the industry in this area. And we are currently conducted blockchain pilots. Andrea will present them in the cotton and leather value chains. We have a blockchain system in place, and we are let's say, putting in practice the approach and the standard developed under the project in a blockchain system to test how that works, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities, especially for SMEs, as let's say the skills and digital gap certainly is out there and needs to be filled. Next, please. So very quickly about the traceability, transparency, sustainability, and circularity dimension. Traceability, we mean there the ability to trace history, application, and location of an object, the conditions, in a few words, the conditions in which the object has been produced. Transparency is about disclosure. It's about making visible these conditions in which an object, so clothing items, are produced and communicating about it. Sustainability, it's about all activities throughout that take place throughout the product's life cycle, considering the environment, health, human rights, and socioeconomic dimension. And circularity, it's also a very important dimension that is coming more and more prominent in the policy and regulatory agenda, and it is about value retention. Traceability, transparency also play a very important role there in support of circularity in this industry. Next, please. When it comes to the policy action, I would say that in our policy recommendation number 46, adopted at the UN CFAC plenary just at the end of April, we have identified 5 very important dimensions that we think policymakers and regulators should take into consideration. First of all, harmonization and policy coherence, as emphasized right at the start. The definition of minimum level of traceability, starting from raw material sourcing for products, for processes, and for facilities. We believe that traceability and transparency do need to happen throughout the whole scope of the value chain, starting from the raw material sourcing and processing, where many of the environmental, social, human rights hotspots are located. There is also a need to emphasize the importance of reduced implementation burden through use of international standards and use as much as possible of existing data, burden that needs to be reduced, especially for SMEs. Incentives need to be there: financial, non-financial, sustainable procurement, VAT reduction, fast-track processes for compliant actors are among the type of incentives that we think are important to consider. Research and development, innovation also play an important role, especially to harness the potential of advanced technologies. Awareness and education for consumers, but especially training for SMEs and for the small actors play a role. And finally, to bring in this policy coherence, multi-stakeholder initiative and consultation processes that really bring on board all the key actors along the value chain and all key actors for this industry. Final slide on my side, and I would like then to pass it over to Gerard. It's about the what we trace and assess. As I said, the scope of traceability and transparency as defined in the approach that we have developed as part of the project is really from raw material production through manufacturing and branding to consumption and post-consumption. We look at aspects like origin and location, very important, economic operators, composition and specifications for products, for processes, and for facilities. And we do cover in our, let's say, matrix data model, all main environmental, social, health and safety risks and aspects as I would say mapped out through our collaboration with the International Trade Center based on the analysis of more than 230 sustainability standards and looking at the OECD due diligence criteria. It's really, I would say, a matrix that is based on an in-depth analysis of sustainability standards and criteria that are widely used and accepted at global level.